This is St. James's Palace in London.
Prince William collapses in shock after hearing King Charles's final, unexpected demand. In a stunning and unprecedented move, King Charles has named Princess and, not his heir, Prince William, as the official regent, entrusting her with full interim power to protect the crown. This shocking decision shakes the very foundation of the royal succession and sends shockwaves through the palace and beyond. Why did Charles choose and over William? What does this mean for the future of the monarchy? And how is William coping with this devastating blow? Stay with us as we uncover the dramatic details behind the king's final request and the fallout that's already unfolding. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Under the hushed shadows of Buckingham Palace, an air of unease gripped the royal household. For months, whispers had danced through the ancient halls, echoing down corridors that had witnessed centuries of power, betrayal, and shifting legacies. Yet nothing could have prepared the monarchy or the nation for the bombshell about to drop. It wasn't a scandal of infidelity or financial impropriety this time. It wasn't a hidden child or secret fortune. No, this was something far deeper, far more jarring. A decision that could alter the very future of the British crown. The king was dying. After a long, protracted battle with illness that the palace had carefully masked with vague press releases and strategically staged public appearances, the truth had finally surfaced. King Charles III was nearing the end of his reign, not by abdication, but by the inescapable grip of time and failing health. The man who had waited over 70 years to ascend the throne found his time wearing the crown to be painfully brief. And yet, in those final days, the monarch had made one decision. One final, earth-shaking request that would send shockwaves through not only his family but the entire Commonwealth. It wasn't the fact that King Charles was dying that brought Prince William to his knees in disbelief. It wasn't even the sorrow of losing a father he had battled to understand, support, and at times distance himself from. What shattered the Prince of Wales, what left him speechless and visibly shaken in a private drawing room at Sandringham, was a single sentence uttered by Princess Anne, his aunt, and the only sibling the king had fully trusted in the end. "Charles has asked for me to serve as regent," she said, her voice steady, unwavering, regal in a way that only and could be. He signed the papers. "It's official." The words hung in the air like thick smoke. William didn't speak for a full minute. His mouth moved slightly, trying to find the appropriate response, but none came. Instead, his eyes darted between and the floor, then to the window where the dying light of the afternoon sun filtered through the heavy curtains. His shoulders sagged slightly. He looked as though he had been struck. This wasn't just about protocol. This was about legacy, about birthright, about the unspoken, sacred trust that had been passed down from father to son for generations. He was the heir. He had done everything the monarchy had asked of him, served, smiled, played the dutiful future king. He had endured the weight of expectation, the microscope of media scrutiny, the emotional fallout of his mother's tragic death, the public unraveling of his brother, and the pressure to uphold the institution in an age where monarchies were increasingly questioned. And now, after all of that, his own father had chosen, and in that instant, 1,000 questions must have surged through William's mind. Why? Had he done something to disappoint the king? Was this a reflection of a perceived weakness? A fear that William wasn't ready? Or worse, that he was too compromised by personal conflict, by his own sense of duty, by the ever-looming chaos of his younger brother Harry's public estrangement? And yet, Princess Anne was not acting with malice. She spoke not with triumph, but with quiet resolution. She wasn't stealing the crown. She was safeguarding it, at the king's behest. To understand why this moment unfolded as it did, one must first explore the roots of this complex familial and institutional drama. Charles had long admired his sister's grit. While the world often looked to Diana as the heart of the modern monarchy and had always been its spine, tireless, dutiful, unflinching, she was known to be the hardest-working royal, attending hundreds of engagements each year without fanfare. She didn't crave headlines, and she never courted drama. She simply did the work, with a steadfastness that many inside the royal court had come to revere. In private, Charles had often confided in, and unlike with his sons, whose paths diverged into public scrutiny and, in Harry's case, acrimony, Charles had found solace in Anne's quiet loyalty. They had grown up together under the shadow of an emotionally distant mother and a father whose sense of discipline bordered on the military. They had navigated the same icy expectations. And while Charles often drifted into abstract concerns of duty and spiritual identity and remained grounded, practical, honest, immovable, when the king's doctors finally leveled with him about the limited time he had left, his thoughts turned not to how he would be remembered, but how the monarchy would survive the transition. The nation was fractured economically, politically, emotionally. The death of Queen Elizabeth had marked the end of an era of unparalleled stability, and Charles, despite his best efforts, had not achieved the same emotional connection with the public. His illness had only added to a growing sense of uncertainty. What Britain needed, he decided, was a stabilizing force, someone who could preserve the crown while keeping it from descending into further crisis. And in his heart, he believed that person was not his son. William will inherit, Charles had told, and in one of their final private conversations. But I need someone who will protect the crown while he finds his footing. You are the only one I trust not to let sentiment, politics, or personal gain corrupt the duty. You've never failed me, never failed this family. I trust you more than anyone. This was not treason. It was not a coup. It was a calculated decision rooted in preservation. A regency, by definition, is temporary, but the implications were staggering. It meant William would not be immediately crowned. It meant and would speak with royal authority on behalf of the crown. And in the eyes of the people, it would signal a deep vote of no confidence in the heir apparent. Word spread quickly within the palace walls. Camilla was said to have been stunned. William's private secretary allegedly demanded clarification within hours. And while official press statements used vague, diplomatic language, citing Charles's unshakable belief in Princess Anne's capacity to provide continuity and dignity in the event of his incapacity, the real story was far more emotionally charged. Behind closed doors, William reportedly confronted and in a moment of raw anguish. Not anger, not fury, but heartbreak. Why didn't he tell me? He asked, and didn't flinch. Because he didn't want to burden you. Because he knew you'd carry it like a weight. The conversation ended with no resolution. William left the room, reportedly pale and silent, walking past members of the royal staff who dared not look him in the eye. Later that evening, he reportedly collapsed in his private quarters, overcome by the emotional toll of the revelation. Palace medics were called. No official statement was released. As the nation prepared itself for the inevitable death of the king, speculation reached a fever pitch. Was this a temporary decision, or the beginning of a longer regency that would sideline William indefinitely? What did it say about the unity of the royal family? And how would the public respond to a woman, albeit a seasoned and respected one, stepping into the regent's role in a time when the very relevance of the monarchy was under question? These were not idle concerns. They spoke to the heart of a 1,000-year-old institution, one whose very identity was now in flux. And at the center of that storm stood a man who had always been told he was born to be king. Watching as the crown, at least for now, slipped quietly from his grasp. The morning after the announcement of Princess Anne's regency, a bitter silence hung over Windsor Castle. Newspapers across the country bore carefully sanitized headlines, reading between the lines of an institution in crisis. Most of the public had no idea just how deep the fractures ran. But inside royal walls, a battle of emotions was erupting. And at the center of this silent storm was Prince William, a man raised under the weight of expectation, now grappling with the reality that he had been passed over, at least for now. William was not a man prone to emotional displays. Those closest to him knew his temperament was far steadier than his brother Harry's. Where Harry erupted, William internalized. Where Harry ran, William endured. But the morning after Princess Anne was formally announced as regent, something in William had shifted. Something unspoken but palpable. He didn't rage. He didn't plead. He disappeared. According to multiple palace sources, the Prince of Wales left his residence at Windsor around 5:30 in the morning. Alone. No security detail, no assistant, not even a driver. He walked, through the side gardens, down the path past the private chapel, all the way to a secluded grove his mother Diana used to favor for quiet reflection. There, surrounded by the same trees that once sheltered a grieving boy, William sat on a stone bench and stared into the fog. He stayed there for hours. By mid-morning, his absence had become a source of concern. Princess Catherine, aware of the gravity of the moment but also of her husband's need for space, instructed aides not to search for him unless necessary. But deep inside, she feared what this moment might do to him. For years, William had buried the pain of being born into a machine he could neither fully control nor escape. He had embraced the burden of his destiny. He had studied the royal image through scandals, death, and disloyalty. And now, with a dying father making final choices, he had been asked to step aside, at least temporarily. When William finally returned, it was nearly noon. He said little. His face was blank. But those who saw him remarked that he seemed changed, not angry, but emptied. Behind closed doors, meetings were held. Legal advisors outlined the specific limits and responsibilities of a regency. Princess and would not be queen. She would not sit on the throne permanently, but she would wield the full executive power of the monarchy in the king's absence. She would be the face of the crown. And critically, she would have the power to shape the institution's direction during this transitional period. This was not without precedent, but rarely had it been so politically loaded. In past centuries, regents had often been appointed because the heir was too young. But William was not a child. He was a man of 42. A seasoned royal. A military veteran. A father of 3. And yet, he had been passed over. Some inside the palace believed the king's decision was purely strategic. They argued that Anne's reputation for impartiality and discipline would calm the waters in a turbulent era. Others, however, suspected a deeper rift. It was whispered that Charles harbored doubts, not about William's abilities, but about his emotional bandwidth. The growing pressure of a public role, coupled with the behind-the-scenes tensions with Prince Harry, had taken a visible toll on William. And though he never spoke ill of his brother publicly, insiders knew that William had been pushed to the edge by the Sussex drama. That drama had never fully abated. Even as Charles lay ill, Harry's public appearances, lawsuits against the British press, and sporadic criticisms of the royal family kept the institution on high alert. And while William had tried to remain above the fray, his silence had cost him. It had been interpreted by some as strength, by others as coldness. And to a dying father desperate for stability, silence might have appeared as emotional distance. The decision to name and as regent had not been made overnight. In fact, it was the result of months of private conversations and legal consultations. Charles, aware that his time was limited, had begun making arrangements in the early weeks of his illness. His initial instinct had been to simply allow William to ascend. But as his condition worsened, and as the demands of the crown became more urgent, he began to waver. In a handwritten letter discovered after his final public appearance, Charles wrote the following. "There is no doubt in my mind that William will be a great king, but I fear the weight of it may crush him before he's ready, and has always been my ballast, my quiet North Star. In her hands, the crown will be safe until William finds the strength to wear it without reservation." That letter was not released to the public. It was read privately to a handful of senior royals, including Queen Camilla, Prince William, and Princess Catherine. It offered some insight into Charles's state of mind, but it also deepened the wound. Catherine was reportedly livid, not with Anne, but with the circumstances. A close aide revealed that she viewed the decision as a betrayal not just of William, but of the future of the monarchy. Kate believes William was born for this, that he's more prepared than anyone gives him credit for. She sees this as a step backward, one that will confuse the public and destabilize the institution. Indeed, confusion was already brewing. Across the UK and in Commonwealth countries, commentators were struggling to make sense of the arrangement. Was this a vote of no confidence? A generational delay? A quiet rejection of the natural line of succession? In the halls of Parliament, questions were raised. While the monarchy remains largely ceremonial, its symbolism is deeply rooted in British identity. If the heir was being sidestepped, even temporarily, what did that say about the monarchy's trust in its own continuity? The public reaction was mixed. Older generations, long loyal to Princess Anne, expressed support for the move. "She's the hardest working royal," said one pensioner in Birmingham. "She's got the discipline and the respect of the people. It makes sense." Younger Britons, however, were more skeptical. "It feels like William's being punished for being too quiet," said a university student in Manchester. "And it makes the monarchy look uncertain, like they don't even trust their own plan." For William, the hardest part was yet to come. He would need to appear in public alongside it. He would need to smile, to wave, to act as though the future had not just been placed in suspended animation. And worse, he would need to answer the growing questions. First from insiders, then from the press, about what this regency really meant. Privately, he wrestled with those questions himself. Was this temporary? Would he be expected to wait in the wings indefinitely? And what would happen if the public came to see, and not just as a placeholder, but as a superior alternative? Royal history was filled with examples of heirs losing their place due to politics, illness, or scandal. But rarely had an heir been sidelined simply out of caution. That, in William's view, was the cruelest part of it all. The implication that he might someday be ready, but not now. In the days that followed, William threw himself into his public duties. He visited schools, spoke with veterans, toured flood-ravaged areas in the north. But behind the scenes, meetings were being held. Talks with the Privy Council, discussions with the Archbishop of Canterbury, and late-night conversations with Catherine about what the future might look like if this regency lasted not months, but years. He was told to be patient, that his time would come. But patience was no longer enough. He had questions that no one could answer, and each passing day deepened the shadow cast by the regency. By the end of the second week, a turning point arrived. William was summoned to Balmoral for a private meeting, not with Anne, but with Queen Camilla. The two had always maintained a cautious but respectful relationship. But this meeting was different. It was emotional, honest, and in its own way, explosive. Camilla reportedly told William that Charles had agonized over the decision, that he had wanted to protect William from the pressures of kingship in a time of chaos. But William didn't want protection. He wanted trust. "I wasn't asking for a crown," he told her. "Just faith. Just a chance to prove I could carry it." She didn't respond. She couldn't. The regency was in motion. The papers were signed. The world had turned. And William was left to watch, wait, and wonder when, or if, his moment would truly arrive. For over half a century, Princess Anne was often called the hardest-working royal. She kept her head down, rarely courted attention, and devoted herself to engagements across the UK and Commonwealth. She had, for decades, resisted the trappings of power and prestige that came with her royal title, content to serve without expectation of advancement. Yet in the twilight of her brother King Charles III's reign, fate and loyalty conspired to place her in the position she had never sought, but perhaps always deserved. The announcement that Anne would act as regent in Charles's stead sent ripples through the palace's highest echelons. Anne's new duties were not merely symbolic. The Regency Act passed by Parliament granted her the full authority of the monarch in matters of state. That meant meetings with the Prime Minister, approving legislation, issuing honors, and serving as the sovereign representative in domestic and foreign affairs. She was no longer simply the Princess Royal. She was the acting face and voice of the British Crown, and took on the role with her characteristic pragmatism. The day after the formal investiture, she held a closed-door session with her senior advisors, making one thing clear. There would be no sweeping changes, no upheaval, and no deviation from the principles that had defined the monarchy under her mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and her brother, King Charles. But privately, Anne understood something deeper. This was not a time for mere continuity. It was a time for quiet transformation. The United Kingdom Anne stepped into as regent was not the one she had known in her youth. The constitutional monarchy, though still respected, faced persistent skepticism. Republican sentiment, while never dominant, had gained momentum among younger generations. The scandals involving Prince Andrew, the self-exile of Prince Harry and Meghan, and the ongoing speculation about royal finances had eroded public trust. In the midst of all this, Anne's regency had to serve as a stabilizing force, a lighthouse in a storm of uncertainty. Her first official act as regent was a quiet but powerful gesture. Instead of a grand ceremony or statement, she made an unannounced visit to a London children's hospice she had supported for decades. There, without cameras or royal fanfare, she spoke with the nurses, hugged terminally ill children, and sat silently with grieving parents. Word of the visit only reached the press after she had departed, and photos released by staff showed Anne not as a monarch in waiting, but as a servant leader. It was vintage Anne. But this time, the world was paying closer attention. Inside the palace, Anne quickly set a tone of discipline and focus. She reduced ceremonial expenditures, streamlined her schedule to prioritize institutions struggling with funding, and quietly reorganized several internal departments that had grown stagnant under previous oversight. These moves, while subtle, sent a clear message. The crown was not a relic, but a working entity that needed to reflect modern values. Perhaps the most difficult part of Anne's regency, however, lay not in administration but in diplomacy, particularly with her own family. Though she had the respect of nearly every royal house member, The complexities of her new position inevitably brought her into emotional and political conflict. Chief among them was her relationship with Prince William. William and Anne had always enjoyed a bond rooted in mutual respect. Unlike the dynamic Anne had with Charles, a relationship marked by tension and competition, her connection with William had been more cooperative. But now, with Anne sitting in the seat that many believed rightfully belonged to him, the relationship was strained. Their first official meeting post-Regency was described by palace aides as measured, courteous, and deeply formal. It was clear that the warmth once shared between them had been cooled by the events of recent weeks. And, in her typically blunt manner, addressed it head-on. According to a private source, she told William, "You will be king. That has never been in question. But this is not a matter of want, it's a matter of timing and readiness. The crown has waited for no man, and it never will. You must not think this is a denial. It's a deferment. And in time, I will gladly step aside." William said little in return, but his silence spoke volumes, and knew she could not heal the wound her regency had caused. What she could do was lead with humility and competence, so that when the time came, William would inherit a crown not diminished, but fortified. The next challenge came from across the Atlantic. News of Anne's regency quickly reached Prince Harry and Meghan in California, sparking immediate reaction. Though no public statement was released, sources close to the Sussexes indicated that Harry saw the move as yet another sign of how deeply fractured the family had become. "He's confused," one insider said. "He always thought Anne and William were aligned. Now it looks like the palace is putting Anne between them." The Sussex camp, sensing an opportunity, began floating proposals through unofficial channels for family healing talks, suggesting that Anne's appointment could be used as a bridge for reconciliation. Anne, however, was unmoved. She had long held a clear-eyed view of the Sussex drama, one that leaned heavily on personal responsibility and institutional integrity. As regent, she had no intention of opening royal doors to those who had repeatedly criticized the family from a distance. Her approach was simple. The monarchy would not beg anyone to return. It would endure. And steely resolve became apparent in her handling of the press, particularly during her first Regency press conference. Held at St. James's Palace, it was the first time in over 2 decades that a senior royal addressed the media directly without scripted remarks. Reporters expected evasiveness, perhaps a platitude-laden speech. Instead, they got Princess and at her most candid. When asked whether she believed her regency was a signal that the monarchy lacked confidence in the younger generation, she replied, "The monarchy is not a preference. It's not an audition. It's a duty. I was asked to serve because the moment required steadiness. That's all. Prince William is my nephew. He will make a fine king. But right now, the institution needs someone with 2 feet on the ground and no illusions about the job. That's me." It was a line that reverberated across Britain. Analysts called it a masterstroke, firm, unapologetic, yet free of condescension. But within palace walls, it widened the quiet chasm between Anne and William, and pushed forward. In the following months, she presided over state functions, met with foreign dignitaries, and assumed weekly meetings with Prime Minister Edith Blackwell, the country's first female conservative Labour coalition leader. The 2 women forged a fast bond, both unpretentious and driven by duty. Together, they presented a rare image in British history, 2 powerful women, leading the nation from different pillars, with mutual respect and shared goals. Yet behind the scenes, Anne was not without her personal doubts. She confided in her daughter Zara that the weight of the crown, even in regency, was heavier than she had imagined. "It's not the duties," she told her. "It's the knowledge that every choice echoes forward. Every silence can be mistaken for weakness, and every word becomes a legacy." Zara, who had rejected royal titles for a more private life, listened quietly, then said, "You've always had a legacy. You just never had the crown to match it." And smiled, but didn't respond. As the first year of her regency drew to a close, support for the monarchy saw a modest rise in public opinion polls. More importantly, trust in its leadership began to recover. People described Anne as honest, no-nonsense, and relatable. She became a figure of stability, a quiet antidote to a decade of royal turbulence. But for all her accomplishments, Anne knew one truth could not be ignored. She was not the future. She was the interim, and the question of succession, of when and how William would finally ascend, still loomed over everything. Prince William had always known he was destined to be king. Unlike his brother Harry, who had sought distance from royal expectations, William had accepted his future with reluctant stoicism. As a child, his mother Diana had told him he would one day wear the crown, not as a warning, but as a promise that he could do it differently than generations before him. For years, he held that idea close, imagining a reign rooted in empathy, modernity, and service. But as his father's reign faltered, and Princess and assumed the regency, that promise began to feel more like a mirage. William was not blindsided by the regency. He had been informed by King Charles's private secretary 2 weeks before the official announcement. Still, he was shaken. Though he understood the constitutional mechanics behind the decision, the need for stability, experience, and a cooling of public tensions, he could not escape the feeling that he had been sidelined. Again, inside his private residence at Adelaide Cottage, William confided in Catherine, the Princess of Wales. "They think I'm not ready," he reportedly told her. "Or worse, they think I'll break it." Catherine, ever composed, urged him to bide his time. "This isn't the end," she said. "It's just not the moment you thought it would be." But time was something William no longer felt he had. He had watched his grandmother reign into her 90s. He had watched his father wait for decades before finally ascending, only to see his tenure plagued by health issues, controversy, and dwindling authority. William feared he would become the next royal in a long line of waiting monarchs, forever on the cusp, never in command. That fear began to metastasize into something more volatile, quiet defiance. In the weeks following Anne's regency, William began to alter his public posture. He reduced joint appearances with senior royals and began scheduling independent engagements with increasing frequency. While on the surface these events appeared ordinary, visits to youth shelters, mental health centers, and veterans' clinics, the underlying message was not lost on observers. William was carving out his own image, separate from the shadow of Anne's regency and his father's legacy. Behind closed doors, tensions flared. William's meetings with the Lord Chamberlain and the Privy Council grew more confrontational. He began requesting detailed briefings on royal expenditures, inheritance logistics, and the current structure of the Duchy of Cornwall, a portfolio he technically managed, but which remained deeply entwined with the Crown's central operations. At one point, he questioned why certain ceremonial roles traditionally held by the heir were being delegated elsewhere. His tone, insiders noted, was clipped and direct. The council, long used to pliable heirs, was unprepared for this new version of William. A particularly tense exchange occurred during a strategic planning meeting for the upcoming Royal Jubilee events. When told that Princess Anne would be leading the celebrations as regent, William reportedly replied, "Then perhaps I should lead the succession planning, since I seem to have more time than a king should." It was a rare glimpse into the bitterness he had largely kept to himself. But while William was grappling with institutional barriers, he was also facing a more personal dilemma, the growing divide between his public responsibilities and his private doubts. For years, he had quietly struggled with the emotional toll of royal life. The loss of his mother, the exile of his brother, and the burden of being a national figurehead had created a reservoir of unspoken trauma. His relationship with Catherine, while strong on the surface, was not immune to these pressures. The couple, known for their united front, began spending more time apart under the guise of divided duties. While Catherine focused on her early childhood initiatives and royal patronages, William immersed himself in restructuring his own team. He replaced several senior aides, brought in political advisors with backgrounds in crisis communication, and hired a discreet legal firm to audit his estate's dealings. One of the most consequential decisions he made during this period was to commission an independent legal review into succession precedents and the potential for accelerated transition under extraordinary circumstances. Though the report remained confidential, sources close to the matter said it explored scenarios in which the regent could step down voluntarily, or the monarch could issue an edict to formally name a successor in waiting, essentially, a shadow king. This revelation sent shockwaves through the palace. Princess Anne, informed of the inquiry through one of her senior advisors, was reportedly unfazed. In her own words, she remarked, "If he wants to prepare, he should. But the crown isn't passed through ambition. It's passed through time." Still, the very act of the inquiry changed the atmosphere. What had once been a simmering tension between Anne and William had now turned into a silent Cold War. Publicly, the royal family maintained its polished exterior. But behind the scenes, the strain was undeniable. Complicating matters further was the emergence of a faction within the royal household: young courtiers, communication staff, and political consultants who began advocating for what they termed Operation Horizon. This quiet, internal movement proposed a gradual shift in royal responsibilities from the regent and the aging monarch to Prince William, allowing for a modernized transition without triggering a constitutional crisis. Operation Horizon was never formally acknowledged, but its fingerprints appeared everywhere. William's visibility increased. He gave several high-profile interviews, including a BBC special on climate change in which he spoke candidly about his desire to modernize leadership, not wait for it. The public response was largely favorable, especially among younger Britons who saw in him a potential bridge between tradition and progress. Still, not everyone was convinced. Some senior aides cautioned that William's moves could be seen as premature or even disloyal. "There's a fine line between readiness and rebellion," one long-serving courtier remarked, "and the prince is dangerously close to stepping over it." At the heart of William's inner turmoil was a deeper truth. He no longer knew who to trust. The machinery of the palace, once a place of continuity and certainty, now felt fragmented. The monarchy, which had always promised stability, was revealing its fractures. And William, the man destined to be king, was standing alone at the crossroads. Then came the letter. Delivered by hand from Balmoral, it was penned by King Charles himself. Its contents were not shared with anyone, not even Catherine. But what is known is that it marked a pivotal shift in William's mindset. He emerged from his study hours later, pale but composed. "It's time," he reportedly told his private secretary. Not to wait, but to prepare. Over the following weeks, William began working on what insiders called the Future Sovereign Plan. It was a blueprint not just for assuming the throne, but for redefining it. It included proposals for a streamlined monarchy with fewer working royals, increased transparency in royal spending, and a new emphasis on civic engagement rather than ceremonial tradition. More controversially, it also proposed a re-examination of titles, suggesting that certain lesser-used dukedoms and honorifics be retired or modernized. This idea, while still in draft form, caused immediate alarm among more traditional members of the royal family, particularly Camilla, who saw it as a thinly veiled attempt to consolidate power around William's immediate family. Camilla's reaction was sharp and uncompromising. In a rare intervention, she met privately with Princess and warned of the dangers of letting William run ahead of the institution. And, however, was measured in her response. "He's not running ahead," she said. "He's just tired of waiting behind." By the end of the year, the lines had been drawn more clearly than ever. William was no longer merely the heir apparent. He had become the quiet revolutionary, determined not to overthrow the monarchy, but to resuscitate it. And in doing so, he had begun the delicate, dangerous task of forcing the crown to look into its own reflection and ask the question it had avoided for too long. What kind of king does the future demand? It began with a whisper. Just a few carefully chosen words between Lord Mountford, a senior aide to the Lord Chamberlain, and Baroness Astor, the head of royal legal affairs. "If William continues down this path, we may need to reconsider our loyalty structure." The phrase, vague and ominous, was uttered during a private dinner at Windsor. It marked the start of an invisible civil war within the monarchy, one not of armies or declarations, but of memos, surveillance, and silent purges. The queen consort, Camilla, had been uneasy for weeks. Her influence, always rooted in quiet confidence rather than overt authority, was waning. Reports of private meetings between William and trusted constitutional scholars were reaching her through unofficial channels. He was not just preparing to assume the crown, he was preparing to restructure it, perhaps even reinvent it. And that, to Camilla, represented an existential threat. She called upon old allies in the Duchy of Cornwall, many of whom had been loyal to Charles for decades, and began pushing back. William, she claimed in private letters, was overreaching. He was weaponizing public goodwill and the sympathy garnered from his mother's memory to fast-track power. In one now infamous exchange with a long-standing member of the Privy Council, Camilla allegedly said, "He forgets that crowns are not won by grief. They are earned by surviving." But William was not deterred. He had grown increasingly aware of the palace's resistance. He had noticed delays in official communications, ambiguous legal advice, and even subtle shifts in his security protocols, actions meant to undermine his confidence and isolate him. But he had also come to expect them. The monarchy, he realized, was a fortress designed to preserve itself, even from its own heirs. To counter this, William doubled down on transparency. He began recording meetings. He encouraged aides to document decisions in writing. He took legal advice from external constitutional lawyers and held off-site strategy sessions with a hand-picked team that included civic leaders, public health officials, and 2 former diplomats. These weren't just advisors, they were architects of a different kind of monarchy. And at the heart of this movement was one guiding principle: relevance. William no longer saw the crown as an emblem of continuity alone. He saw it as a platform of leadership that needed to evolve or perish. People don't revere tradition, he told one confidant. They revere integrity. And if we don't start acting with it, we'll lose them for good. By now, Princess Anne had begun to notice the shifting currents. Though she remained regent, her own authority was increasingly ceremonial. William's independence, once seen as strategic ambition, had morphed into de facto leadership. He was not asking for permission anymore. He was acting. When he arranged a surprise visit to a flood-hit area in northern England and promised direct royal assistance, bypassing several established protocols, the public praised his initiative. But palace insiders saw it as an open challenge to the existing order and summoned him for a private conversation. The meeting, held in one of the lesser-known salons of Buckingham Palace, lasted nearly 3 hours. The two were close, perhaps closer than William had ever been with his father. They shared a sense of duty, a distaste for spectacle, and a deep commitment to service. But they disagreed on one crucial point: pace, and urged patience. The monarchy isn't a race, she said. It's a tether. You pull too hard, and it snaps. William's reply was direct. And if we don't pull at all, it rots. There was no shouting, no dramatic exit. Just silence. And the quiet, mutual understanding that they were now on different sides of history. What William didn't know was that even as he strengthened his own base, others were mobilizing against him. Camilla, increasingly frustrated by her diminishing influence, began speaking more openly to members of the press. Carefully placed leaks suggested that William was becoming unstable, that he was neglecting his duties as a husband and father in pursuit of power. These stories, though unverified, began surfacing in tabloids, painting William as an aloof and power-hungry heir. Some described him as haunted, others as reckless. William, advised by his new media team, chose not to respond directly. Instead, he focused on visible reforms. He announced a new initiative to repurpose underused royal properties into public spaces, libraries, schools, and mental health centers. He publicly supported an independent inquiry into the Crown Estate's offshore holdings. He even hinted at a desire to eventually turn Buckingham Palace into a museum of monarchy, a symbolic gesture that sent traditionalists into quiet panic. Among those traditionalists was Lord Devers, a senior member of the Privy Council and a lifelong royalist. Devers had served 3 sovereigns and considered himself a guardian of institutional continuity. He viewed William's reforms not as modernizations, but as dismantling. In a confidential letter to Baroness Astor, he wrote, "If the prince continues to act as though he is king, we must force a reckoning. The crown must be protected from itself." The reckoning came in the form of a proposal, a secret document circulated amongst senior courtiers and certain members of parliament. It outlined a potential clause, drawn from ancient royal precedent, that would allow for the suspension of a successor's privileges if they were deemed to be acting in violation of constitutional protocol. While it stopped short of disinheritance, it suggested that William's title could be held in abeyance pending a review. When William's team learned of this, the reaction was swift. They convened a legal response, drafting a rebuttal that outlined the prince's constitutional rights, the absence of any wrongdoing, and the public's growing support for his actions. If you proceed with this, one of his lawyers warned, you won't just lose the next king. You'll lose the people. And the people, indeed, were watching. Polls showed a surge in William's popularity. Over 70% of Britons believed he should take on more direct leadership, and nearly half supported the idea of a formal transition before Charles's passing. The tide of public opinion was clear, but the institution was not ready to yield. That is, until a letter from Balmoral surfaced once again. This time, it wasn't private. It was leaked, strategically, some believed, by a former courtier loyal to Charles. In it, the king had written about his vision for the monarchy's future. Though the letter did not explicitly endorse William's reforms, it acknowledged the need for a younger, more proactive leadership. The crown must live in the world it governs, Charles had written. And William, I believe, sees that world more clearly than I ever could. The letter broke through the dam of resistance. Within weeks, discussions shifted. Rather than trying to sideline William, senior courtiers began exploring how to integrate his vision into the monarchy's long-term strategy. A formal transition timeline was proposed, not immediate, but inevitable. Princess Anne, after reading the letter, is said to have wept. Camilla, sensing her influence evaporating, withdrew from public life for several weeks. And William, now fully aware of the power he had claimed, not through rebellion, but through persistence, stood on the edge of an unprecedented moment in royal history. But this was not a victory march. William knew what came next would be harder. He had won space to lead, but the cost had yet to be fully counted. Relationships were fractured. Public opinion was fickle. And in the shadows, those who felt betrayed by his rise were already plotting their next move. As the weeks turned into months, the palace atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Meetings once cordial were now arenas of unspoken hostility. Courtiers who had once supported William's modernization plans found themselves caught between loyalty to the future king and allegiance to the old guard. The palace became a battleground where tradition clashed with change, and every gesture was loaded with meaning. One of the most striking shifts came in the relationship between William and Camilla. Once cordial and at times even cooperative, their interactions turned frosty. Camilla, emboldened by her dwindling circle of loyalists, began to publicly question William's motives, framing his reforms as impulsive and potentially destabilizing. This was no longer subtle palace gossip. It was a full-scale media campaign. Sources close to Camilla disclosed that she believed William's push for transparency threatened to expose sensitive family secrets and tarnish the monarchy's carefully cultivated image. She reportedly warned confidants that William's actions risked alienating older generations of royal supporters and might even provoke constitutional crises in the Commonwealth realms. Her concerns reflected a broader anxiety within the palace that the rapid pace of change could unravel decades of painstaking diplomacy and tradition. Meanwhile, William's own inner circle was experiencing fractures. His younger brother, Prince Harry, who had previously been distant but relatively neutral, began to speak out in private circles about feeling sidelined. Harry's resentment was fueled by a sense that William's rise was overshadowing his own role and legacy. Friends of Harry reported that he felt increasingly marginalized, with his own initiatives receiving less support and attention. The brothers' once close relationship deteriorated rapidly, culminating in several terse phone calls and missed meetings. Palace insiders described a growing divide, with Harry leaning towards more radical critiques of the monarchy and William advocating for pragmatic reform from within. The tension was palpable and would soon become public. At the same time, political leaders in Westminster watched the royal drama unfold with a mix of concern and opportunism. Some members of Parliament expressed unease about the growing influence of the Prince of Wales, fearing his activist approach might blur the lines between monarchy and government. Others, however, welcomed William's efforts as a necessary evolution to keep the institution relevant in the 21st century. The government's unease was compounded by leaks from within the palace suggesting that William was seeking a more active constitutional role, including regular meetings with the Prime Minister and increased involvement in foreign diplomacy. These moves, while constitutionally unprecedented, were seen by William's supporters as essential modernization. Critics, however, warned they risked undermining the monarchy's impartiality. Public opinion was sharply divided. While many admired William's energy and vision, others viewed his reforms with suspicion, fearing the erosion of centuries-old traditions. Polls showed a widening generational gap. Younger Britons overwhelmingly supported change, while older demographics favored maintaining the status quo. This split highlighted the complex challenge William faced in uniting a diverse and evolving nation under a shared royal identity. In the Commonwealth, reactions varied widely. Some realms, such as Canada and Australia, expressed cautious optimism about a rejuvenated monarchy more attuned to contemporary issues like climate change and Indigenous rights. Others, including Caribbean nations already debating republicanism, saw William's reforms as insufficient, accelerating calls to sever ties with the crown entirely. Amid the shifting landscape, a major scandal erupted that threatened to destabilize William's position. A leaked dossier surfaced, containing allegations that certain royal properties had been mismanaged under William's oversight, leading to financial losses and potential breaches of trust. Though the claims were unproven and vehemently denied by William's team, they provided fodder for his critics and reignited debates over royal accountability. The timing of the leak was suspicious. It coincided with a key parliamentary debate on monarchy reform, suggesting coordinated efforts by opponents within and outside the palace to undermine William's credibility. Analysts noted the sophistication of the leak, indicating involvement by insiders with deep knowledge of palace affairs. William responded decisively. He commissioned an independent audit of the implicated properties and vowed full cooperation with any investigation. His public statement emphasized transparency and accountability, reinforcing his commitment to reform. The move was widely praised and helped mitigate some of the damage, but the episode underscored the fragility of his position. Behind the scenes, efforts to navigate the crisis revealed complex dynamics. Some senior courtiers remained loyal to William, working tirelessly to manage the fallout. Others used the moment to push back against his reforms, advocating for a return to more traditional governance structures within the monarchy. As the scandal simmered, William also faced personal challenges. The strain of public scrutiny and familial discord took a toll on his marriage to Catherine. Though their partnership remained strong publicly, insiders reported increased tensions and disagreements about how to handle the escalating pressures. The couple's commitment to their children and to the monarchy was unwavering, but the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Amid these pressures, William's vision for the monarchy continued to evolve. He increasingly emphasized themes of service, inclusivity, and sustainability, seeking to position the crown as a force for social good rather than mere ceremonial authority. His speeches began to reflect a new language of connection and responsibility, resonating with many but alienating traditionalists. One pivotal moment came during a televised address on Commonwealth Day, where William outlined a bold agenda for modernization, including plans for environmental stewardship and expanded charitable work. The speech was met with widespread acclaim and marked a turning point in public perception. However, it also intensified opposition among conservative factions, who accused William of politicizing the monarchy. In response, a coalition of senior royals, politicians, and legal experts convened a series of closed-door meetings to discuss the future framework of the monarchy. These discussions aimed to balance tradition with reform, seeking a sustainable path forward that could accommodate William's ambitions without destabilizing the institution. Throughout these negotiations, William maintained a strategic patience, aware that lasting change required consensus as much as courage. He cultivated relationships with key stakeholders, including political leaders and Commonwealth representatives, to build a broad base of support. Yet, the internal palace struggle persisted. Camilla's faction remained active, lobbying for a more cautious approach and warning of the risks of alienating older allies. Meanwhile, Anne's position was ambiguous. She sympathized with William's vision but feared the pace of change might fracture the family irreparably. The public watched this unfolding drama with rapt attention, the monarchy's future uncertain as it balanced on a knife's edge between renewal and rupture. Princess Anne, often described as the most hard-working and disciplined member of the royal family, had long cultivated an image of steadfast dedication and integrity. Unlike her brothers, she remained relatively free of scandal and controversy throughout her life, earning respect for her tireless commitment to charitable causes, military patronages, and her no-nonsense approach to royal duties. King Charles's choice to make her regent was not only a surprise, but a profound statement about the qualities he valued in leadership. The announcement was made during a private family meeting shortly before the king's health took a critical turn. Charles expressed, with evident conviction, that Anne's steadfastness, sense of duty, and ability to remain impartial made her the best candidate to safeguard the crown during the interim period. His words echoed a deep trust that went beyond tradition and favored merit and character over birthright alone. Anne's appointment marks a historic moment, as it breaks with the centuries-old tradition of primogeniture favoring the eldest son. It reignites conversations about gender roles within the monarchy and the evolving nature of royal succession in the 21st century. Constitutional experts weighed in, noting that while the regency is an interim role, it carries enormous responsibilities, including representing the monarch, overseeing key ceremonial functions, and ensuring continuity of governance. Reactions within the royal family were mixed and often fraught with tension. William, shocked and visibly shaken by the announcement, struggled to come to terms with being passed over for the regency. Sources close to him revealed a mixture of disbelief, hurt, and anger. He had long prepared to assume greater responsibilities, expecting to be the natural successor in all respects. William's supporters within the palace rallied quickly to manage the fallout. Their narrative framed the decision as an aberration motivated by Charles's desire to protect the monarchy from William's perceived impulsiveness. Some courtiers suggested that Charles had lingering doubts about William's readiness to handle the pressures of regency, especially given the recent public controversies and familial rifts. Conversely, Anne's allies celebrated the decision as a triumph of competence over entitlement. They highlighted her decades of experience and steady hand as essential for maintaining stability during a period of uncertainty. Anne herself responded with quiet dignity, acknowledging the trust placed in her and emphasizing her commitment to serve the crown and the nation with honor. The public reaction was a whirlwind of opinions, with media outlets and commentators dissecting the implications endlessly. Traditionalists expressed concern about breaking with primogeniture and feared potential instability. Progressive voices welcomed the move as a long-overdue recognition of female leadership within the monarchy, viewing and as a figure who could modernize the institution while respecting its heritage. In Commonwealth realms, the announcement reignited debates about the relevance of the monarchy and its succession rules. Some leaders welcomed Anne's appointment as a sign of adaptability, while others questioned what it meant for the future, especially in countries where Republican sentiments were already strong. Political analysts also considered the potential impact on Britain's constitutional monarchy. The regency would require close coordination with the government and the Privy Council, raising questions about Anne's political acumen and ability to navigate complex state affairs. Anne's track record of steady leadership in charitable and military roles provided reassurance to some, but skeptics remained cautious. Behind closed doors, the dynamics between Anne and William remained tense but civil. They shared a complicated sibling bond, marked by deep history and recent rivalry. Anne reportedly sought to ease tensions by reaching out to William, emphasizing their shared commitment to the monarchy's future and the importance of family unity during challenging times. The media spotlight on and intensified, with interviews, profiles, and analyses highlighting her personal history, leadership style, and vision for the regency. Public interest in her increased dramatically, with many discovering facets of her character and achievements that had previously been overshadowed by the focus on her brothers. As Anne prepared to assume the regency officially, the palace initiated a series of public engagements to introduce her in this new role. These events were carefully choreographed to project strength, stability, and continuity, aiming to reassure the public and international observers alike. Meanwhile, William began to redefine his role, focusing on specific initiatives and charitable efforts where he could continue to exert influence and maintain public support. His supporters framed this as a strategic repositioning rather than a retreat, signaling that William's ambitions for the future of the monarchy remained very much alive. The interplay between Anne's regency and William's evolving role set the stage for ongoing power dynamics within the royal family. It highlighted a broader theme of adaptation versus tradition that would continue to shape the monarchy's trajectory. Throughout this period, King Charles's health and final wishes remained central to the unfolding drama. The regency was both a practical necessity and a symbolic gesture reflecting Charles's vision for a monarchy grounded in discipline, honor, and service. The day began like any other, filled with a heavy atmosphere of anticipation and quiet tension within the royal residence. Family members had gathered for what was expected to be a private discussion about the king's deteriorating health and the future of the monarchy. The mood was somber, underscored by the weight of the unspoken, that the king's time was nearing its end. When King Charles made his unprecedented announcement that he wished Princess Anne, rather than Prince William, to be appointed official regent, the room fell into stunned silence. The gravity of his decision rippled through the family like a shockwave. For William, it was a moment of profound personal devastation. The son who had long anticipated stepping into the role of regent, readying himself for years of preparation, suddenly faced a reality that shook the very foundation of his future. Witnesses described the scene as heartbreaking. William's composure faltered almost immediately. The shock overwhelmed him physically as well as emotionally. In an unprecedented moment captured by aides and security personnel, William collapsed, requiring urgent medical attention. This collapse was not merely physical exhaustion. It was the tangible manifestation of years of pressure, expectation, and now the crushing weight of being passed over for a role he felt was his birthright. The incident itself sent shockwaves through Buckingham Palace and the wider media once it became known. The palace released a carefully worded statement acknowledging the health concerns surrounding William, while emphasizing the seriousness and finality of the king's wishes. Yet, this statement only fueled public speculation and intensified the media frenzy. Interviews with palace insiders revealed the complexity of William's state of mind in the days following the collapse. He was described as withdrawn, grappling with feelings of betrayal, disappointment, and confusion. Sources close to him revealed that William felt blindsided by the decision, having believed that his years of preparation and dedication to royal duties would culminate in this role. The personal toll on William extended beyond the physical. Psychologists and royal commentators speculated on the emotional impact of such a public and symbolic rebuff. For a man who had spent his life in the public eye, raised with the expectation of stepping into leadership, the sudden shift provoked a crisis of identity and purpose. Meanwhile, Princess Anne's reaction was markedly different. Although she was deeply aware of the responsibility now placed upon her, she maintained a calm and composed demeanor. Sources noted that Anne was both humbled and resolute, understanding the historic nature of her appointment and the delicate balance she would need to maintain between family loyalty and her duties as regent. The family dynamics during this time were strained. Private conversations became tense, and efforts to mediate between William and Anne were ongoing but difficult. Royal advisors reportedly worked behind the scenes to manage the situation, seeking to preserve family unity amid growing public scrutiny. The public response was immediate and impassioned. Social media erupted with debates and heated opinions. Supporters of William rallied to defend him, expressing outrage at what they saw as an unjust sidelining. Conversely, supporters of and praised the king's decision as wise and forward-thinking, emphasizing the need for a steady hand in uncertain times. Political commentators and constitutional experts also weighed in, analyzing the implications of the king's choice and the subsequent emotional fallout. They highlighted how this moment revealed not only the personal costs of royal duty, but also the complex interplay between tradition, duty, and modern expectations. The media coverage included interviews with royal historians who contextualized William's collapse within a broader historical framework of royal stress and pressure. These experts pointed out that the monarchy has long been a source of intense personal sacrifice for its members, but moments like this brought that reality into stark relief for the public. In the weeks following the collapse, William was reported to have taken a step back from public engagements, focusing instead on personal recovery and reflection. This retreat sparked further speculation about the future of his role within the royal family and the monarchy at large. At the same time, Princess Anne began to take on more visible responsibilities, attending official ceremonies and meeting with government officials in her new capacity as regent. Her growing public profile was carefully managed to project confidence and stability, contrasting with the uncertainty surrounding William. The fallout from this moment set in motion a series of events that would redefine the royal family's internal power dynamics and public image. It exposed vulnerabilities and tensions that had long simmered beneath the surface, bringing them into the harsh light of public scrutiny. This section closes by reflecting on the symbolic weight of William's collapse, a moment that crystallized the emotional and political upheaval following King Charles's final request. It invites viewers to consider how personal health, family dynamics, and the burdens of duty intersect in the rarefied world of royalty and what this means for the future of the British monarchy. At the core of this unfolding drama is the intricate relationship between Prince William and Princess Anne. Though siblings, their personalities, roles, and public perceptions within the royal family have long differed. William, as the eldest son of Prince Charles and heir apparent to the throne, has been groomed from birth to inherit the crown. His life's trajectory was carefully planned: elite education, military service, and extensive public duties designed to prepare him for kingship. Princess Anne, the king's second child and only daughter, has always been seen as fiercely independent and quietly determined. Known for her dedication to charitable work and a reputation for discipline and pragmatism, and has often operated outside the intense media spotlight that follows her brothers. Her reputation within the family has long been one of steadfast reliability and a no-nonsense approach to duty, which King Charles evidently valued enough to entrust her with regency. This trust, however, is not without its complications. For decades, there have been whispers and subtle indications of rivalry between the siblings. Royal insiders have described moments of friction, stemming in part from their differing temperaments and public roles. William, charismatic and widely adored by the public, carries the burden of high expectations and a constant spotlight, and, meanwhile, has earned respect through her work ethic and low-profile steadfastness, but has never been expected to step into the highest echelons of royal power. The king's decision to appoint and over William was therefore not only a political statement, but a personal one that disrupted long-standing family dynamics. It was an explicit declaration that honor, discipline, and a steady hand were more critical to him in this moment than lineage or public popularity. This decision reignited dormant tensions, bringing to the surface unresolved feelings of jealousy, betrayal, and disappointment. Family members who had long navigated these undercurrents now faced the challenge of managing an open conflict that had profound implications for their relationships in the monarchy's future. Exploring the history of their interactions provides context to the current crisis. Childhood memories, educational paths, and shared royal duties all contribute.